that book will give to you. But for a book club, so when I'm doing book club recommendations, I'm thinking in slightly different ways about the classics than I am when I'm just thinking about recommending classics.
I don't know about you, but also when it comes to a book club, and you're right, I recommend very different things to book clubs than I do to individuals. Because it's a month and because we have very busy lives, I also think about two other things. What can be discussed in 90 minutes? You know, we're not talking about a college class where you discuss it for 5 days in a row at an hour a shot. And what book is voicey enough that you can pick it up and put it down, and when you come back to it, you know exactly where you are. You know, The Brothers Karamazov, for example, is not a book you can put down and a week later pick up.
Right.
As lovely as it is, you can't pick it up a week later and say, oh, I remember exactly where all of these characters are psychically as well as physically in the novel.
And I was just reading yesterday when I was surfing the web looking for some information, a list of the most influential book of the 20th century, and they asked a bunch of authors that. Did you see that? Well, the most influential book of the 20th century is Ulysses, which you would never give to a book group to read. But it's arguably not only the most influential book, but a true classic. But you might give somebody James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man.
Right.
Absolutely. One of my favorite Joyce books.
Yes.
Right. Well, let's start in with one of the shorter ones, the shorter classics that we have for today, and that's Heart of Darkness. And Nancy, can you just give us a little synopsis of the plot before we start?
Well, I thought that you did a wonderful job of giving a synopsis, but basically I would say that this is a novel about good and evil, and it's set in the heart of darkness, as Africa, the Congo, was known at the turn of the century. And Joseph Conrad's take on that inevitable conflict between Marlowe and Kurtz, I think, is something that informs the 20th century in terms of moral thought. I think Graham Greene, for example, was a wonder. I bet Graham Greene was a very close reader of Joseph Conrad. I could hardly imagine that Graham Greene didn't know Joseph Conrad. But I think why Joseph Conrad's book is so good for book groups is because it deals with issues larger than the setting and its time.
Now, do we need to understand that setting and time? I mean, I was preparing for this show and looking through some information, and I guess Joseph Conrad's come under some fire as this book being racist. Do we need to understand where he was writing from, where he was coming from at that time?
You know, I suppose like Marlowe in the book, yes and no. You know, the classic man who is able to say yes on one hand and no on the other. I think yes and no. I think it helps to know about colonialism and empire building, but I think that in the late 20th century, early 21st century, we're facing another kind of empire building, and I think we're facing the empire building of multinational corporations. And I think that we don't have to historically know. I think we instinctively know the conflict. I think all of us know this sense. I mean, these demonstrations in the streets, I think, are a classic sort of response to a new kind of empire building. And I think that's why we don't need to know, and why this book is a classic, because the themes are there. We're feeling these themes whether we realize the historical context or not. If it was, if we only viewed it as a historical novel, I think we would look at it the same way we look at these hornblower books, which I think are historical novels and little more. I think the themes are bigger. I think that we all know a heart of darkness, whether we're talking about the Congo, which most people don't know firsthand, or we're talking about riots in Los Angeles over the fact that people are economically deprived. I don't think we have to know specifically, and I don't think the book is racist. I think the book is about power and control, and the evil of power and control, and I think we all know that.
And I think we all can see a heart of darkness in ourselves as well, and that's one of the things I think that Joseph Conrad was struggling with. I think that it's a book that, as you said, Mark, so well, that it opens up the world rather than narrowing the world for us. It opens it up.
Even though it talks about a very narrow place, a very specific place and time.
And people.
And people, right.
But I think that one of the things about classics, and this might be very interesting to talk about, is a lot of the classics, a lot of the books that we consider classics, in a rereading in the 21st century, do strike many people as having racist elements. Mark Twain. Dr. Dolittle, for example, the children's book. Hitty, Her First 100 Years by Rachel Field. If you go back and read those books that were popular in the 40s and 50s, it's a different world that they're describing, and it's a world where those attitudes and behaviors were much more acceptable than they are today. So I think you have to read, not that you need to know the context, but I think you have to have an appreciation or a recognition of the time period in which it was written.
I think we also have to have a recognition that language has changed so dramatically in the last 25 years. And there are words that were used for 100 years in a thoughtless kind of way that meant one thing that now means something else entirely. I mean, I remember when I was teaching Mark Twain, and the question is whether or not I could teach one of his novels because the word nigger appeared, a word that we all revile these days, but a word that had a very different meaning 100 years ago, 70 years ago, within our own parents' lifetimes. The same thing with Joseph Conrad. I mean, the word appears, and your first thought is, oh, and then you realize that in 1902, when this book was published in Britain, that was the word of choice. And it was not a put down, it was the word of choice. People didn't say things like African American or, I suppose, Afro-Brit. I have no idea what they're saying in London these days. It was the word of choice, and it had a very different meaning than it means today, and certainly a very different connotative meaning than it has today.
Now,
but I want to back up with one other thing, because we were talking about the narrow time frame. What's the first heart of darkness? I mean, I'm going to sound pedantic and the school teacher here. What's the first heart of darkness that Marlowe talks about?
The Thames. He talks about the river.
And it's the River Thames. This was once the heart of darkness. And you can't help but leave the book saying, and what's the next heart of darkness?
Right. Is that, and I guess that's why we keep coming back to this book. I mean, we've had Apocalypse Now. We've had another movie version, I guess, starring John Malkovich of this book. And we're still intrigued with this idea of he talks about going back so far you can't get back. Isn't that what the Russian says when he meets? And so is that the thing that resonates within us, do you think? That feeling that you can be this, for me the book was, we're not so far from that dark place. We're never very far from that dark place. And when do we know that we are crossing over, and where does that go? The other question that I had was, and Nancy, you started talking about this, was the moral stance. And does Conrad give us a moral stance about what is going on in the country, this colonialism?
Oh, I think he absolutely does. And I think that perhaps it helps to have read King Leopold's Ghost by Adam Hochschild, which talks about Joseph Conrad being one of those early fighters for human rights in the Congo. Interestingly, I think that Joseph Conrad's reputation, for example, there's a wonderful novel by Timothy Findley which opens with a woman sitting in a mall in Toronto, and she's reading Heart of Darkness, and Kurtz escapes from the book, and evil descends on Toronto.
And what better place than from a mall? But we won't go there.
Right, absolutely. But and Ward Just talks about Joseph Conrad in his wonderful novel, A Dangerous Friend. So there's lots of there's much that we can take from it, and I think, and I do think that Conrad's moral stance is something that we should value.
Mark, do you feel that he takes a stand in this
I
book?
do, but I think the stand is bigger than the Congo. When he talks about Kurtz, it's not just about the fact that this man is looting the Congo. It's about the fact that he is corrupted by his own power, and he is corrupted by the fact that there are no checks on his power. Yes, it's about the Congo, and I think that all great stories have to be situated someplace. But I think it's bigger than that. I think that, and the fact of the matter is that, Marlowe talks about his own heart of darkness, and he talks about the hearts of others. It's not just about those people in the Congo, but maybe those people in the Congo are illuminating
Right.
the darkness in all of our
Oh,
lives.
right.
And when you see the darkness, I mean, so many authors have talked about, going to the brink and stepping back. When you look into the abyss, and I think the easiest abyss of the time was to talk about the colonies, because the greatest atrocities were being committed. And as much as the First World War, which everyone anticipated, was about Europe, it was also about colonial acquisition.
Right.
And the war had actually really broken out in the colonies long before it broke out in Sarajevo. I think it's a bigger. I think the colonies are a good way to show it. But I think the fact that he starts by talking about the Thames and the Romans is really talking about all of us.
Right, right. A wonderful book. Would you both recommend this as something for both individuals and book clubs to pick up again?
An unqualified yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Right.
Absolutely agree.
I think this would also be a good choice for book clubs that are mixed. But book clubs are heavily women. I think this would be also a novel that would appeal very strongly to men.
Absolutely.
Great. Good, good. We'll be back in just a moment with more discussion. We'll be talking about Edith Wharton's The House of Mirth in just a minute, so please stay tuned.
Lots of
Reader
fun.
and book devotee, thank you both for being with me, and thank you for joining me here on Book Talk. We'll see you next time. Who are we starting with? Hello and welcome to this edition of Book Talk. The holidays are upon us. Hello and welcome to this edition of Book Talk. Well, the holidays are upon us, and that means one thing for me, which is to go to the local bookseller and get some books for holiday gift giving. If you're in that same bind, stay tuned, get a pencil and paper, and get ready to jot down the titles of the books that we'll be talking about today. We have two guests with us, and they've each brought their selections for books for everyone on your book in your gift-giving list this holiday. So please stay tuned. My guests with me today are Nancy Pearl from the Seattle Public Library. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks, Sharon.
And Terrell Aldridge from Elliott Bay Booksellers. Both of these eminent readers have selected, and it's been a tough choice, to come up with two books in several categories of good books that would be great gifts for Christmas. So we'll start our discussion today with children's picture books. Now, I'm a great believer that everybody should get a book for the holidays. And to start younger readers off, what would you suggest this holiday season?
Well, I think for any time of year, a really good gift is any book by Kevin Henkes. And his new book is called Wemberley Worried. And this is about a little mouse who's going off to her first day of nursery school and is very worried about everything. I think any parent who is a worrier, and it's hard to imagine a parent who isn't a worrier, would love this book. Partly because not only the plot of the book, which is just wonderful, but Kevin Henkes' illustrations are delightful, and his characters are always mice, and this is just a terrific little book.
Good. And how about you?
I brought Olivia, who is a pig as opposed to a mouse, and she is a wonderful character, and the book tells about her busy days and what she does to keep herself occupied, including going to the art gallery and dressing and undressing and moving the cat around the house. The illustrations are really wonderful by Ian Falconer, who you might recognize from the pages of the New Yorker magazine. It's just a great book. Everybody at the store loves it.
Good. So both of these books, I know when I had children of this age, they would have me read the same book over and over again. So that's always my test when I'm buying a good children's book. Will it stand the test of much rereading? Both of these, Nancy, Terrell?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of text in Olivia,
Right.
so a lot of it we won't have a lot to do.
So you can make it up as you go on.
Right. But I think the text in Wemberley Worried is equal to the pictures, and I think that makes a big difference when you're reading and rereading.
Okay. Good. The next category is kind of a tricky one, and it's for young adults, and this I'd say somewhere anywhere between 9 and 15. So, and that's, I think, a very tough age to choose books for nephews, cousins, whatever. What would you suggest in this category, Nancy?
Well, Philip Pullman's final book in the trilogy that began with The Golden Compass and then The Subtle Knife, his new book is called The Amber Spyglass, and it ties up all the loose ends and explains everything that all the readers of the first two books were wondering about. So I would say that would be high on my list for people, young people I know who have read the first two books and have been really eagerly waiting for the third one.
What were the first two again, just in case people want to know?
The first one is called The Golden Compass, which I think is the best of the trilogy. Mm-hmm. The second one is The Subtle Knife, and the third is The Amber Spyglass. I think throughout these three books, what Philip Pullman has done is really written them for progressively older children, so that those people who read The Golden Compass when they were 11, it's now been, I think, 5 years. So 16 is about the right age to read The Amber Spyglass. It is not a book for young children.
Okay, great. Terrell, what would be your choice for a young adult book?
Well, I brought the T.A. Barron's The Lost Years of Merlin, which is, I brought the fourth book in the series, and the fifth is due out soon. My nephew, who has read all the Harry Potters and all the Pullmans, is a very good reader at the age of 8, but he loves these Merlin books. They talk about Merlin as a young boy, and so he identified easily with the main character. But if you're into that magical fantasy sort of thing, this is a great series.
Mm-hmm. Is this a series that's more, would you say, enjoyed more by boys than girls, or?
I think either could enjoy it. the people I happen to know who liked it best happen to be boys.
Okay, and this is fourth in a series. The first three are available?
They are available in both hardcover and paperback.
Okay, great. Well, that would be a great thing to find under the tree. Okay, next, fiction. And this is a broad area. And it's always tricky buying books for people if you don't exactly know their taste. Nancy, what are you suggesting for fiction?
The book that I've enjoyed a lot recently is a book by a woman named Helen DeWitt. This is a first novel called The Last Samurai. And the main character in this book is a little boy. He's 6 years
Hello, my name is Jermaine Covington, and I'm with the Seattle Office for Civil Rights. It's my honor and privilege today to have Miss Angela O with us. Miss O is a member of the advisory board to the President's Initiative on Race. Miss O, you're here in town today for a very special event. You were the keynote speaker at the luncheon, the Vision of Freedom Award luncheon, sponsored by the Northwest Coalition Against Bias and Bigotry. I have to thank Bill Wasmith, the director of the Northwest Coalition, for this opportunity to talk with you about the road ahead for civil rights.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm very pleased to be in Seattle.
Yes. I was at the luncheon, and I have to say that it was very inspirational, and I particularly enjoyed your comments and the observations that you made about race relations in Los Angeles, where you're from, as well as what you've experienced as you've traveled around the country.
Thank you. That's very kind.
How has the experience of serving on the advisory board influenced or changed you?
Well, serving on the advisory board has given me a national perspective on issues that I've become very familiar with from my work and activities in Southern California. The whole area of race relations and trying to find ways to bridge racial and cultural divides is something that I've been doing for many, many years. And now to be invited by our president to act as an advisor on an initiative that came to the public's attention with some, I think, cynicism awaiting, it has been really an extraordinary experience, because from a national perspective, I see where we are headed.
Oh, please tell me, where are we headed?
Well, what I see is a need, an affirmation, I suppose, for us as a country to continue to figure out ways to reckon with our past. We do have a legacy of slavery that has translated into a number of problems that we see manifesting themselves in employment, in education, in housing. And we have layered on top of that the reality of the next millennium, which means advances in communications, advances in transportation, the interrelatedness of our economics with world economics, the interrelatedness of our politics, domestic politics being very much connected to what's happening in other parts of the world. And so we've got this enormous challenge ahead of us. And I would say that the President's Initiative on Race is something that not just this nation is concerned about, but I've just traveled from the Middle East to look at the peace process there, and I know that people are aware of this initiative in that part of the country and that part of the world, and they're looking to see what is it that the last remaining superpower is going to have to say about how we begin to bridge those divides among us.
It seems like a daunting task. It's a 7-member advisory board, and you've been together a little over 9 months, and you have a year-long charge. What can you hope to accomplish? What's the charge of the group?
Well, we really are not charged with finding any answers. We're charged with starting the conversation, a conversation that really is not about just exposing everything that people are unhappy with in their lives and what they've experienced around race and prejudice and bigotry, but rather how we begin to look at a constructive way to move forward in our communities, in our state houses, and at the national level. so that our paradigm of race relations in this country moves from one that has been pretty bilateral, black and white, to one that becomes multidimensional. Because you do need to move in that direction if you are going to look to the future and honestly examine race relations in America today and into the next millennium.
Okay. Part of what you talk about is how we can work together to achieve full potential of all people. Do you have some suggestions, or have you seen some examples around the country that work to help us do a better job of leveling the playing field so that minorities and women can achieve their full potential?
Well, I think our interest has to be in America achieving its full potential, because we know we're not there. We have these glorious principles that speak to concepts of equality and justice and equality of opportunity. And yet we know that in important places where those opportunities lie, there is a shroud of discrimination that functions to really deprive people of the chance to demonstrate their gifts and their abilities in the employment setting and educational settings. And so, yes, I have seen programs that have worked, and these are programs that are designed to target an audience that you know needs to be at the table and is not at the table. These are programs that are designed to prepare children from a very young age to compete effectively in the next century. If you want to talk about mentoring programs, educational curriculum development, we've seen a number of examples of what we're calling promising practices in different fields. Again, education is a key area. Economics is another area. People want to not lose sight of the fact that there is a very close relationship between questions around race and how it has affected and really infected our society, and also around access and economics, because we see and understand that in order for people to begin to think beyond themselves, they have to have a level of security that their work, that their educational options are there and in place, without worrying that there will be a time when they have to look back and say, there was some other decision operating here, and it was one that isn't proper.
Well, I raised the question because in California, I know last year, and in our state, there's a debate around affirmative action. And
Yes.
Is it meeting the goals that it was set out to achieve? And if so, what happens when people feel that it's an unfair advantage? So that's why I asked that question about leveling the playing field and what it will take. Do you see that occurring in the next 5-10 years, or what's your prognosis on that?
I need to be clear that I'm a proponent of affirmative action, and I am a product of affirmative action, and I say that with the utmost confidence that I was given these opportunities, having come to the table with the qualifications to take advantage of these opportunities. And I'm talking about undergraduate and graduate studies, as well as studies in the field of law. And I do think that this is a tool, it's one of many tools that is valuable in helping us to level that playing field. I don't know what to say in the face of people who can point to examples that they have seen in their individual lives, except to point back to examples that I have seen in my life where I saw the affirmative action programming actually work. And nobody in the area of promoting affirmative action is saying that we should give these opportunities to people who are not qualified. That's never been the intent, and it's never, in fact, been the goal. These are not preferences, these are not quotas, these are typically policies that are looking at the context, the total context, and saying, okay, do we need to do more here in terms of trying to get a diversity of representation in our classes? In California, for example, post 2009, we're seeing what this means to not have affirmative action as a tool to our public universities, some of the finest universities in the country and definitely in the state. Our University of California system is turning back numbers now that are very, very troubling for any thoughtful person, any enlightened person who cares about preparing young people for leadership positions in the future. You know that you cannot put them in an environment that does not reflect the reality of the communities or the world that they will be operating in. You're depriving them of an opportunity to really learn what it is, the dynamics, the things that can't be picked up in the textbooks, but have to be picked up in the experiences that one has in higher education. And you know, how we will respond to that is, in the first instance, to begin to look at the preparation of our kids in that pool of applicants that will come before. We will also be looking at the levels of satisfaction within the learning environment, I think, as this new entering class of the year 1998-99 come in, because I think we don't even have a true picture yet about what the numbers will look like and what the student profile in our universities of California will be, because it's one thing to be able to report admittances, those kinds of figures, but who in the student population will accept and choose to go into those environments? And then what will we have? So I'm very, very anxious to see what the fall semester will bring in terms of the actual students that say, yes, I will choose this place to go and pursue higher education.
Did the initiative meet in any areas of the country where you saw some best practices at work that ended up with the results of more diversity in their educational system or in other careers?
Yes, I've been every place that we go, and we've met monthly since last summer. Every place that we go, we try and connect with organizations or projects that have been identified by our staff as promising practices. In the economics arena, I met in Arizona with an energy company that has been doing some very innovative work. Lots of private businesses are, I think, coming forward saying we would like to establish business relationships with minority and women-owned business enterprises. We don't quite know how to hook up. We don't know if what our needs demand at this time match up with what these enterprises have to offer. So what they've done is they've taken it on themselves to create like an academy in which they take business enterprises that are not micro but are doing maybe $250,000 to $1 million and have the potential to do $10 million with financing, technical assistance, and secure contracts. And they've started an academy in which they are reaching out to vendors that their energy company needs to use. And so they have, for example, a vending relationship with a temp agency. They've wanted to expand the opportunities to reach those businesses that are out there but they didn't have a relationship with. So they're having this academy concept come through, and it helps the businesses because at no cost to the small businesses, they're getting the technical assistance and the financial commitment to be able to grow their business to their fullest potential. And it's great for the energy company because now they have this relationship with another business enterprise that they might not have otherwise known about had they not opened their doors and put out a call for people to apply for this program. So it was very innovative. In Oakland, California, I went to visit a community-based project in which there has been a very successful collaboration between public entities, the private sector, and community-based organizations to deliver a development